So here we have this VEVOR 4.2 pounds per minute electric meat grinder. Now, full disclosure, they did send this to me for free, but the opinions in this video are my own. Alright, so I'm going to really quickly unbox this and show you everything that comes with it, and then we'll test it out. It came packaged pretty nicely in this box with everything wrapped up individually, and the meat grinder they sent me comes with quite a few different pieces here. There's this plastic burger patty press, and then these two meat claw tenderizers. They are hollow on the backside though. There's also these 3 different size stainless steel plates for the meat grinder, as well as the one that's already on there. There's this plastic tool here that you're going to use to push the meat down. Connected up to the machine, I have the meat grinder. It kind of just locks into place, and then if you push this button, you can twist it and pull it off. It's got this socket on the backside that connects into the gear, and is fully made of stainless steel along with the pan up top. The front of this unscrews, which allows you to change out this front plate, and then pulling it off, there's a blade on the backside, and then this main corkscrew that does most of the grinding. You can also switch out the grinder for this plastic shredder here. It has the same push pin to push in the meat, and then you can choose one of these 3 drums. There's a couple shredders and then this slicer, and you just fit them into here like this, and that'll shred or slice the meat. It is just plastic though, and it's not quite as nice of a fit. Back to the grinder attachment though, you can also attach this sausage stuffer just like this, and now you can use it to stuff sausages. Anyway, taking a look at the machine itself, this is a 500-watt machine. It's mostly made of plastic. This top part is a thin stainless steel. It has a really simple on-off button and then a button to put it in reverse. There's a vent on the back, and then this plastic container you can use to fill up with meat. The machine is definitely a little bit top heavy with the motor being mounted up here, but to compensate for that, on the bottom there's these 4 suction cups, so we'll see how well those things work. Anyway, it has about a 4-foot long cord, and you can wrap it up under here just like this. It's definitely not a commercial size meat grinder, but it's pretty cheap and it comes with some decent attachments, so let's go ahead and try it out. Alright, so first I set up the meat grinder, and on the first run through I used the plate with the largest round holes, and then for the meat I used beef along with 20 to 25% beef fat. I cut the meat into about 1-inch strips, and then I stuck them in the freezer for about an hour to get them partially frozen. Same thing with the fat, but I found out it works better if you cut the fat into smaller chunks. Anyway, I made sure the meat grinder was stuck down to the table, then I got a bowl and got started. I fed in the meat 1 strip at a time, and then about every strip I added some fat, and you can see it chunk through it with no problems at all. I'm really happy with how nicely it pulled the meat strips through. Once it grabbed onto a strip, it pulled it all the way through and ground it up, and I only had to use the plastic pusher thing on the pieces of fat. And this was my first time using a meat grinder, but it seemed to chunk through it pretty quickly. After about 3 minutes, I had used more than half of the meat, but that's when there was a bit of an issue. Basically, it just stopped pushing anything out, and even when I shoved more in, it just seemed to be jammed up. So I unscrewed the front of it and popped the whole thing off, and after taking it apart, I looked inside, and it was clogged up with fat. I figured that was the issue, so I cleaned it out with my finger and a butter knife, and then I put it all back together. And after that, it worked just fine. I was able to finish feeding through all the meat and fat. I did look it up though, and I think the issue was that I made the chunks of fat too big, and since they were so big, they got smushed apart a lot more than necessary, and that smeared fat all over the inside, eventually causing it to clog up. Anyway, here's what the meat and fat looks like after the first grind. Of course, this was only the first run through, so the fat and the meat was not mixed up very well. So to actually mix it up, I stuck it through a second time, and before I did that, I switched out the plate for the medium-sized one. And this time, it all went through a lot smoother because it was already ground up. And you can see when it comes out, the fat and the burger are pretty well mixed together. And it was super easy to feed all the meat through. I just loaded up the top hopper and then used the plastic thing to push it through. And I was able to feed this whole bowl through in about 5 minutes with no issues at all. And once I had pushed it all through, I stuck in a few pieces of ice to clean it out. And that seemed to work pretty well. And here's the finished result. It's a nice bowl of ground beef, and you can see the fat and the meat is all nicely mixed together. Anyway, this thing's pretty simple to clean up. You just twist this piece off here, then take it apart and clean it up with some hot soapy water. And it's all stainless steel, so once you get these pieces mostly cleaned up, you can toss them in the dishwasher. And as for the meat, I packaged that up in the vacuum sealer and then stuck it in the freezer. Anyway, as I mentioned before, it's definitely not a commercial size meat grinder, and I've also only used it 1 time, so I can't say how long it'll last, but apart from that small error on my side, it worked really well. It's also pretty quick, and overall I'd say it's a great meat grinder for the price.